The silence in the command center of the UES Dominion was broken only by the steady hum of life support systems and the occasional beep of monitoring equipment. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the massive holographic display, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the tactical readouts of humanity's greatest achievement, the Sol Defense Fleet. 300 warships hung in formation around Earth's solar system, each one a testament to human ingenuity and determination. The fleet had been built over the past century following humanity's first contact with alien civilizations, a contact that had taught them a harsh lesson about their place in the galaxy. Admiral, called Commander Jackson from his station, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. We're receiving an unusual transmission. It's not from any of our colonies or trade routes. Chen turned, her gray eyes sharp with interest. Origin? Unknown, ma'am. The signal is coming from the Vale sector, approximately 47 light-years from our current position. It's unlike anything we've encountered before. The Vale sector was a region of space that had long been considered off-limits by the Galactic Council, the governing body that regulated interactions between the various alien civilizations. Humanity had been granted associate membership 3 decades ago, after proving their worth in several defensive actions against pirate fleets that had threatened Council worlds. Put it through the translators, Chun ordered, moving closer to Jackson's station. Already did, Admiral. The translation matrix is having difficulty with parts of it, but we're getting fragments. It appears to be a distress signal. Chen felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. Distress signals in space were never simple affairs, especially ones coming from restricted sectors. Let me hear it. The speakers crackled to life, and through the static came a voice that seemed to carry the weight of desperate hope. The alien words were interspersed with translated text appearing on the screens around the command center. To any vessel capable of receiving this transmission, we are the remnants of the Valerian Defense Corps. Our worlds are under siege by an enemy unlike any we have faced. The Devourers have returned. They consume everything in their path, entire star systems reduced to lifeless husks. We have fought for 17 cycles, but we are failing. The transmission continued for several minutes, painting a picture of a civilization under siege by an enemy that seemed to exist solely to consume and destroy. Chen listened with growing concern, her mind already working through the implications. Commander Martinez, she called to her intelligence officer. What do we know about the Valorians? Lieutenant Commander Elena Martinez consulted her tablet, her fingers flying over the surface. The Valerian Empire was one of the founding members of the Galactic Council, Admiral. They're an advanced civilization, roughly equivalent to the Altarians in terms of technology. Their territory encompasses 17 star systems in the Vale sector. They've been quiet for the past 50 years. And these Devourers? Martinez frowned. That's where it gets interesting, ma'am. I'm finding references in some of the older Council archives, but most of the information is classified or restricted. From what I can piece together, there's some kind of ancient threat that the Council faced millennia ago. The records suggest they were defeated or contained somehow. Chen nodded slowly. The Galactic Council was notorious for its secrecy regarding certain topics, particularly those involving ancient threats or technologies. Humanity had learned to read between the lines of Council communications, understanding that there were layers of galactic history that younger species were not privy to. Sir, Jackson interrupted, the signal is repeating, but it's getting weaker. I think their transmitter is failing. The Admiral made her decision with the swift certainty that had earned her command of humanity's premier fleet. Open a channel to Fleet Command on Luna. Priority Alpha. Within moments, the weathered face of Fleet Admiral Robert Hayes appeared on the main screen. Hayes had been Chen's mentor during her early years in the service, and she trusted his judgment implicitly. Sarah, Hayes said without preamble, I assume this is about the transmission we're picking up from the Vale sector? You're monitoring it too? Every listening post from here to Proxima Centauri is picking it up. The Council is going crazy trying to contain the information, but word is spreading fast. What's your assessment? Chen looked around the command center, noting the tension in her crew's faces. These were seasoned professionals who had faced down pirate fleets and hostile aliens, but there was something about this situation that had everyone on edge. If the transmission is genuine, we're looking at a potential extinction-level threat to galactic civilization. The Valorians are asking for help from anyone who can receive their signal. That includes us. Hayes was quiet for a moment, and Chen could see him weighing the political ramifications. Humanity's position in the galaxy was still precarious, despite their growing influence. They were the newcomers, the species that had clawed their way to respectability through military prowess and technological innovation. "The Council has issued a formal statement," Hayes said finally. "They're calling it an internal Valerian matter and have forbidden any outside intervention." "And our response? Officially? We're complying with Council directives. Unofficially." Hayes paused, and Chen saw a familiar glint in his eyes. How long would it take the Sol Defense Fleet to reach the Vale sector? Chen had already run the calculations. 4 days at maximum jump speed, assuming we used the new quantum drives. "But, sir, we'd be going in blind. We have no intelligence on enemy strength, capabilities, or intentions." "What do your instincts tell you, Admiral?" It was a question Hayes had asked her many times throughout her career, and it had never led her astray. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about the desperation in the alien voice, the references to entire star systems being consumed, the implications for galactic security. "My instincts tell me that whatever the Valorians are facing, it's not going to stop with them. If these devourers are as dangerous as the transmission suggests, every species in the galaxy is at risk. Including us." Hayes nodded slowly. "I agree. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure. Full battle configuration." "Sir, what about the Council?" "Let me worry about the politicians, Sarah. Your job is to get our people ready for what might be the fight of their lives." The transmission ended, and Chen turned to address her crew. Every face in the command center was looking at her with a mixture of anticipation and determination that made her proud to be human. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space, "we're about to embark on a mission that will test everything we've learned about warfare, diplomacy, and survival. In approximately 6 hours, the Sol Defense Fleet will depart for the Vale sector in response to a distress signal from an alien civilization under siege." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "I won't lie to you. We're going into unknown territory to face an enemy about which we know almost nothing. The political ramifications of this action could be severe. We may find ourselves in violation of Council directives and facing diplomatic consequences." Commander Jackson raised his hand. "Admiral, what makes this different from any other rescue mission?" "Because, Commander, according to the transmission we received, this enemy has already destroyed multiple star systems. If they're capable of that level of destruction, and if they're moving through galactic space unopposed, then every world we've sworn to protect is in danger." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Humanity had learned hard lessons about the consequences of standing aside when civilizations faced extinction. Their own history was littered with examples of what happened when good people did nothing in the face of evil. "Navigation," Chen called out, "plot a course for the Vale sector. Maximum efficiency, but I want us prepared for combat the moment we drop out of quantum space." "Aye, Admiral." Course plotted and laid in. "Communications, send a fleet-wide alert. All ships to battle stations. I want every weapons system checked, every shield generator tested, and every crew member briefed on what we know about our destination." As her crew sprang into action around her, Chen felt the familiar mixture of excitement and dread that preceded major military operations. She had led the Sol Defense Fleet through dozens of engagements over the past decade, but this felt different. This felt like a moment that would define not just her career, but humanity's place in the galaxy. The massive doors of the command center slid open, and Captain Rebecca Stone, Chen's chief of staff, entered with a tablet in hand. Stone was a brilliant tactical officer who had earned her position through a combination of strategic acumen and uncompromising dedication to duty. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the transmission data. There are some interesting details buried in the signal degradation patterns." Chen looked up from her own tactical displays. "What kind of details?" "The signal has been broadcasting for approximately 72 hours, but the power levels have been declining steadily. Based on the rate of degradation, I estimate the transmitter will fail completely within the next 18 hours. "Meaning?" "Meaning that if we're going to help them, we need to move fast. But there's something else. I've been running the signal through our xenolinguistics database, and there are phrases in the transmission that don't match standard Valerian dialect." Chen frowned. The Valorians were known to be a highly regimented society with strict linguistic protocols. Variations in their official communications were extremely rare. What kind of variations? Archaic terms, mostly. Words that our database indicates haven't been used in standard Valerian for several centuries. It's as if whoever is sending this signal is using an older form of the language. Could be stress-related, Shen suggested. People under extreme duress sometimes revert to older speech patterns. That's possible, Admiral. But there's another possibility. What if the signal isn't coming from the current Valerian government? What if it's coming from a group that's been isolated for centuries? The implications of Stone's theory were intriguing. If the transmission was coming from an isolated Valerian faction, it might explain why the Galactic Council was so reluctant to acknowledge it. Political situations involving lost colonies or separatist groups were always complicated, especially when they involved founding council members. Keep analyzing the signal, Chen ordered. I want to know everything we can about who's sending it and why. As Stone departed to continue her analysis, Chen returned her attention to the tactical displays showing the Sol Defense Fleet. 300 ships representing the pinnacle of human military technology, crewed by the best officers and enlisted personnel humanity had to offer. In a few hours, they would be heading into unknown space to face an enemy that had allegedly destroyed entire star systems. Admiral, Commander Jackson called out again, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Lunar Council representative. Chen sighed. She had expected this. The Lunar Council was Earth's civilian oversight body for military operations, and they had never been comfortable with the defense fleet's aggressive posture. Put them through. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Counselor Margaret Walsh, a career politician who had never seen combat but felt qualified to direct military policy. Walsh's expression was one of barely controlled anger. Admiral Chen, I've been informed that you're preparing the defense fleet for immediate deployment to the Vale sector. This is completely unacceptable. Counselor, we're responding to a legitimate distress signal from an allied civilization. The Valorians are not our allies, Admiral. They're members of the Galactic Council, but they've never shown any particular friendship toward humanity. More importantly, the Council has expressly forbidden intervention in this matter. Chen felt her jaw tighten. Counselor, if the information we've received is accurate, we're looking at a threat that could potentially affect every world in the galaxy. That includes Earth. That's speculation, Admiral. What we know for certain is that defying the Galactic Council would have immediate and severe consequences for humanity's standing in galactic politics. And if we stand by and watch entire civilizations get destroyed, what does that say about our principles? Walsh's face reddened slightly. Admiral, I'm ordering you to stand down. The defense fleet will remain in Sol system until this situation is resolved through proper diplomatic channels. Chen looked around the command center, seeing the faces of her crew. These were people who had sworn oaths to protect not just humanity, but the principles that humanity stood for. The idea of abandoning an entire civilization to destruction went against everything they believed in. Counselor, with respect, the defense fleet operates under the authority of Fleet Command, not the Lunar Council. You're welcome to file a formal protest, but we're launching as scheduled. Admiral, if you proceed with this action, you'll be in direct violation of civilian authority. The consequences, Chen cut the transmission with a gesture, and the screen went dark. Around the command center, her crew continued their preparations with renewed determination. They had heard the exchange, and she could see in their expressions that they supported her decision. Ma'am, Commander Jackson said quietly, that's going to cause problems when we get back. If we get back, Chen corrected. And if we do, we'll deal with the political fallout then. Right now, our job is to respond to that distress signal. Over the next several hours, the Sol Defense Fleet transformed from a defensive formation into an expeditionary force. Ammunition was redistributed, supplies were loaded, and final system checks were completed. Shen moved through the ship, speaking with crew members and ensuring that everyone understood the magnitude of their mission. In the fighter bay, she found Squadron Leader David Kim overseeing the final preparations of his pilots. Kim was one of humanity's most experienced combat pilots, having served in actions against 3 different alien species over the past decade. How are your people, Squadron Leader? Ready for anything, Admiral. Though I'll admit, the idea of facing an enemy that can destroy star systems has got everyone's attention. Any concerns? Kim considered the question carefully. Only one, ma'am. We're going in without any intelligence on enemy capabilities or tactics. we'll be fighting blind. That's always been humanity's specialty, Chen replied with a slight smile. We've never had the luxury of perfect information. True enough, Admiral. But, this feels different. Chen nodded. She had been having the same feeling since they first received the transmission. Trust your instincts out there, Squadron Leader. And, remember, our primary mission is to assess the situation and provide whatever assistance we can. We're not going in to win a war single-handedly. Understood, ma'am. As she left the fighter bay, Chen's calm unit chimed with an incoming message from Fleet Intelligence. The report contained everything their analysts had been able to piece together about the Vale sector and its current situation. The intelligence was sparse, but troubling. Long-range sensors had detected massive energy signatures in the region, consistent with large-scale destruction of planetary bodies. Several trade routes that normally pass through Valerian space had gone silent over the past month. Most concerning of all, a Council survey ship that had been dispatched to investigate the situation 3 weeks ago had failed to report in. Chen made her way back to the command center, where she found her senior officers waiting for her final briefing. These were the men and women who would be responsible for executing whatever plan they developed once they reached their destination. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, we launch in 1 hour. I want to make sure everyone understands what we're walking into. She activated the holographic display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the Vale sector. Red indicators marked the last known positions of Valerian worlds, while orange symbols indicated areas where energy signatures suggested recent destruction. Based on the intelligence we've gathered, the enemy has already destroyed at least 4 star systems in Valerian space. The pattern suggests they're moving systematically through the sector, consuming everything in their path. Commander Stone raised her hand. Admiral, do we have any theories about their ultimate objective? Unknown. The pattern could suggest they're simply destroying everything they encounter, or they could be moving toward a specific target. What we do know is that their rate of advance suggests an enemy with significant resources and capabilities. What about our own capabilities? Asked Captain Torres, commander of the heavy cruiser Indomitable. Are we equipped to deal with an enemy that can destroy star systems? It was the question Chen had been dreading, because she honestly didn't know the answer. Our fleet represents the most advanced military technology humanity has ever developed. We've learned from every engagement we've fought, incorporated technologies from multiple alien species, and trained for scenarios that most civilizations would consider impossible. She paused, meeting each officer's eyes in turn. But, you're right to be concerned, Captain. We're potentially facing an enemy unlike anything any of us have encountered. Our advantage, if we have one, lies in our adaptability and our willingness to do whatever it takes to protect innocent life. The final hour passed quickly. Chen stood on the bridge of the Dominion, watching as the massive fleet prepared for departure. Around her, the crew worked with practiced efficiency, their movements betraying no hint of the uncertainty they all felt. All ships report ready for quantum jump, Commander Jackson announced. Fleet tactical formation, prepare for combat emergence, Chen ordered. Aye, Admiral. All ships acknowledging formation orders. Chen took a deep breath, thinking about the distress signal that had started this whole mission. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, an entire civilization was fighting for its survival against an enemy that threatened to consume everything in its path. Execute jump. The stars around them stretched into lines of light as the Sol Defense Fleet entered quantum space, carrying humanity's hopes and determination toward an uncertain destiny in the Vale sector. The transition from quantum space to normal reality was always jarring, but this time it carried an additional weight of anticipation and dread. Admiral Chan gripped the arms of her command chair as the Dominion shuddered slightly, the massive dreadnought systems adjusting to the sudden change in spatial conditions. Emergence complete, Commander Jackson reported, his voice tight with concentration. All ships accounted for. Formation intact. Chen immediately focused on the main tactical display, where the sensor readings from the entire fleet were being compiled into a comprehensive picture of their surroundings. What she saw made her blood run cold. The Vale sector stretched before them, but it bore little resemblance to the star charts in their databases. Where there should have been the warm glow of inhabited systems, there were only cold, dark spaces punctuated by debris fields that had once been planets. Long-range sensors are picking up massive gravitational anomalies, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim from the science station. Admiral, I'm reading the remnants of at least 3 star systems within our immediate sensor range. The planetary bodies have been completely destroyed. Destroyed how? Chen asked, though she dreaded the answer. The debris patterns suggest systematic disassembly rather than explosive destruction. It's as if something literally took apart every planet, moon, and asteroid, leaving behind only scattered fragments. Chen studied the tactical display more closely. The destruction was unlike anything she had ever seen or imagined. During humanity's expansion into space, they had encountered the aftermath of various conflicts, including the devastation left by ancient wars between alien civilizations. But this was different. This was thorough, methodical, and complete. Communications, she called to Lieutenant Foster at the comm station. Any response to our hails? Negative, Admiral. I'm broadcasting on all known Valerian frequencies, as well as standard emergency channels. No response so far. Keep trying. Navigation, set course for the last known position of the Valerian homeworld. Best speed. As the fleet began moving deeper into the sector, Chen called up everything their intelligence services had gathered about Valerian civilization. They were an old species, one of the first to achieve interstellar travel, and their empire had been a cornerstone of galactic stability for millennia. Their technology was advanced, their military formidable, and their diplomatic influence considerable. If something could systematically destroy a civilization like that, humanity was potentially facing an enemy far beyond anything they had prepared for. Admiral, Commander Stone approached her station with a grim expression. I've been analyzing the debris fields. There are some disturbing patterns emerging. Show me. Stone activated a secondary display, highlighting specific areas within the destruction zones. Look at these concentrations of metallic debris. They're not random. The fragments are arranged in geometric patterns, almost like. She paused, searching for the right words. Like what, Commander? Like construction materials, Admiral. As if something is harvesting the raw materials from destroyed planets and organizing them for future use. The implication hit Chen like a physical blow. An enemy that didn't just destroy, but consumed and repurposed everything it encountered. It was the kind of threat that science fiction writers had imagined but that no military planner had seriously prepared for. Time to Valerian homeworld, she asked. Approximately 6 hours at current speed, Jackson replied. Maintain course. All ships to maintain maximum alert status. Over the next several hours, the fleet encountered more evidence of systematic destruction. Entire space stations had been disassembled, their components sorted and arranged in massive orbital collections. Asteroid mining facilities hung empty in space, their valuable minerals extracted with surgical precision. But it was when they reached the outer edge of the Valerian home system that the true scope of the catastrophe became clear. Admiral, Kim's voice was barely above a whisper, I'm reading massive energy signatures ahead. Something is actively operating in the Valerian system. Chen felt her pulse quicken. On screen. The main display shifted to show the Valerian home system, and what they saw defied description. Massive structures, each one larger than a space station, moved through the system with purposeful coordination. They were geometric in design, all sharp angles and crystalline surfaces that seemed to bend light in unnatural ways. Count 17 large structures, reported the tactical officer. Each one approximately 15 kilometers in length. They appear to be mining operations. Chen watched in horrified fascination as one of the alien structures approached what had once been Valerian Prime, the species' homeworld. Instead of the blue-green planet that should have been there, she saw a partially disassembled sphere of raw materials, its surface stripped away in precise sections. My God, someone whispered behind her. They're taking it apart piece by piece, Stone observed. Stripping away the crust, extracting the core materials, organizing everything into component elements. As they watched, the alien structure extended what looked like massive mining beams toward the planet's exposed mantle. The beams didn't destroy or explode, instead, they seemed to convince matter to simply relocate itself, flowing upward in streams of organized particles. Admiral, Jackson's voice was urgent, I'm picking up the source of the distress signal. It's coming from a concealed position in the asteroid belt. Can you isolate the transmission? Working on it, got it. The signal is coming from what appears to be a heavily modified asteroid. It's been hollowed out and converted into some kind of base. Shen made her decision quickly. Helm, adjust course for the asteroid belt. Reduce speed to 1/4. all ships to maintain stealth protocols. The Sol defense fleet crept closer to the source of the distress signal, their advanced stealth systems masking their presence from both the alien mining operations and whatever detection systems might be monitoring the area. As they approached the modified asteroid, Chen received a priority transmission from Fleet Intelligence. The voice belonged to Commander Patricia Wells, their chief analyst. "Admiral, we've been monitoring the alien structures for the past hour. We're detecting some extremely concerning patterns in their behavior." "What kind of patterns?" "They're learning, ma'am. Each time they process a new section of planetary material, their efficiency increases. They're adapting their techniques in real time, becoming more effective with each operation." Chen felt a chill run down her spine. An enemy that could learn and adapt during combat was dangerous enough, but one that could improve its capabilities while systematically consuming entire worlds was potentially unstoppable. "Any theories about their origin or capabilities?" "Still working on that, Admiral. But I can tell you this, whatever these things are, they've been doing this for a long time. The precision of their operations suggests extensive experience with planetary disassembly." The transmission ended just as they approached the asteroid base. Up close, it was clear that the Valorians had put considerable effort into concealing their refuge. The exterior looked like any other space rock, but Chen's sensors detected significant artificial structures within. "We're being hailed," Foster announced. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was weary and desperate, but it carried an unmistakable note of hope. "Unknown vessels, this is Sector Commander Vexhai of the Valerian Defense Corps. Please identify yourselves." Chen activated the response channel. "Sector Commander, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Sol Defense Fleet. We received your distress transmission and came to provide assistance." The silence that followed lasted so long that Chen began to wonder if the transmission had been lost. Finally, Vexhai's voice returned, tinged with disbelief. "Sol Defense Fleet? You mean, the humans? The humans came?" "Yes, Commander. We're here to help." Another long pause. "Admiral Chen, with respect, you have no idea what you're facing. The Devourers have consumed 17 star systems. Our fleet of 2,000 ships has been reduced to fewer than 50. We are the last survivors of a civilization that has existed for over 40,000 years." Chen absorbed this information grimly. A 2,000 ship fleet reduced to 50 survivors painted a stark picture of the enemy's capabilities. "Commander Vexhai, we need to meet. Can you provide docking facilities for a shuttle?" "Yes, Admiral. But I must warn you, once you see what we're dealing with, you may wish you had never come." 30 minutes later, Chen found herself aboard a shuttle heading toward the asteroid base, accompanied by Commander Stone and a small security detail. The journey gave her time to review everything they had learned since arriving in the sector. The enemy, called Devourers by the Valorians, appeared to be some kind of ancient threat that had returned after millennia of absence. They possessed technology that could systematically disassemble entire planets, converting the raw materials into new structures or stored resources. Their capabilities seemed to improve with each operation, suggesting either artificial intelligence or some form of collective learning. Most concerning of all, they had defeated a fleet of 2,000 advanced warships, reducing one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations to a handful of survivors hiding in an asteroid. The asteroid base itself was a marvel of engineering, its interior hollowed out and converted into a sophisticated command center. Chen was met at the docking bay by Sector Commander Vexhai, a tall, elegant alien whose species Chen recognized from diplomatic functions. Vexhai was typical of his people, tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large, intelligent eyes. But, where Chen had previously seen Valorians in ceremonial dress at council gatherings, Vexhai wore the practical uniform of a military officer, and his face showed the strain of months of constant warfare. "Admiral Chen," he said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting, "I cannot express how grateful we are to see you. When we sent that transmission, we never expected anyone to respond, least of all humanity." Chen shook his hand firmly. "Commander, we don't abandon people who are fighting for their survival. Can you brief us on the current situation?" Vexhai led them through corridors lined with sophisticated equipment and monitoring systems. Chen noted that despite their desperate circumstances, the Valorians had maintained excellent organization and discipline. "The Devourers appeared in our space approximately 4 months ago," Vexhai began as they walked. "At first, we thought they were raiders or pirates. Our initial response was standard defensive protocols. What happened? They ignored our military formations completely. Instead, they went directly to uninhabited systems and began harvesting. By the time we realized what was happening, they had consumed 3 systems and were moving toward populated worlds. They entered a command center that rivaled anything Chen had seen in human facilities. Holographic displays showed the current positions of both Valerian survivors and Devourer forces. We threw everything we had at them, Vexhai continued. Our best ships, our most advanced weapons, our most experienced commanders. It made no difference. They adapted to our tactics faster than we could develop new ones. Chen studied the tactical displays, noting the positions of the surviving Valerian ships. They were scattered throughout the asteroid belt, obviously trying to avoid detection while maintaining communication with the base. What about the Galactic Council? Didn't they respond to your requests for assistance? Vexhai's expression darkened. The Council declared this an internal Valerian matter and forbade outside intervention. They seem to believe they can contain the threat through diplomatic means. And you disagree? Admiral, the Devourers don't communicate. They don't negotiate. They don't even seem to acknowledge our existence as sentient beings. They simply consume everything in their path and move on to the next target. Commander Stone stepped forward. Commander Vexhai, we've observed their operations in your home system. Can you tell us anything about their technology or capabilities? What you see is only the beginning, Vexhai replied grimly. They start with mining operations, systematically stripping away planetary material. But, once they've gathered sufficient resources, they begin construction. Construction of what? More of themselves. We believe the structures you've observed are not ships in the traditional sense, but rather mobile construction facilities. They take the material they harvest and use it to build additional Devourer units. Chen felt her blood turn to ice. A self-replicating enemy that could build more of itself using the materials from destroyed worlds. The strategic implications were terrifying. How long does the construction process take? Based on our observations, approximately 72 hours from the beginning of harvesting to the deployment of new units. Chen did the math quickly. If the Devourers could double their numbers every 3 days, using the materials from consumed worlds, their expansion would be exponential. Within weeks, they could have enough forces to threaten the entire galaxy. Commander, we need to see all of your tactical data. Everything you've learned about their capabilities, their patterns, their weaknesses. Weaknesses? Vexhai's laugh was bitter. Admiral, in 4 months of constant warfare, we have managed to destroy exactly 3 Devourer units. And, within days, they had replaced those losses with improved versions that were immune to the tactics we had used. They spent the next several hours going through Valerian tactical records, and what Chen learned only reinforced her growing dread. The Devourers fought with a precision and coordination that suggested either a collective intelligence or extremely sophisticated artificial intelligence. They adapted to new threats almost instantly, incorporating countermeasures into their tactics within hours of encountering new weapons or strategies. There is one thing, Vexhai said as they concluded their review of the data. In our earliest engagements, before they adapted to our capabilities, we noticed something unusual about their construction materials. What kind of unusual? The quantum signatures of their structural components don't match any known elements. It's as if they're using matter that exists in a different dimensional phase. Stone looked up from her analysis tablet. That could explain how they're able to manipulate matter so precisely. If they're operating with quantum technologies we don't understand, they might be able to influence atomic structures directly. Chen nodded grimly. Advanced quantum manipulation technology would explain the Devourer's ability to disassemble planets with such precision. It would also make them extremely difficult to fight using conventional weapons. Commander Vexhai, what are your current operational capabilities? 47 ships in various states of repair, approximately 3,000 personnel, and enough supplies to maintain operations for perhaps 2 more months. And your strategic objectives? Survival, Admiral. That's all we have left. Chen stood and moved to the central tactical display, studying the positions of both friendly and enemy forces. The Valorians were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that seemed to be immune to conventional warfare. But they were still fighting, still trying to protect what remained of their civilization. Commander, I'm going to ask you to do something that might seem impossible. What do you mean? I want you to help us attack the Devourer construction facilities in your home system. The silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the command center turned to stare at Chen as if she had just announced her intention to attack a star with a pocket knife. Admiral, Vexai said carefully, I understand that humans have a reputation for unconventional tactics. But what you're suggesting is suicide. We've tried direct attacks on their facilities. It doesn't work. Not a direct attack, Chen clarified. Something else. Something they haven't seen before. She turned to address the entire command center. The Devourers have been adapting to traditional military tactics. But they've never faced humanity in a real war. We don't fight the way other species fight. Stone stepped forward, beginning to understand Chen's thinking. Admiral, are you talking about asymmetric warfare? Exactly. The Devourers have proven they can adapt to conventional military strategies. But humanity has never been conventional. We've always won our wars through innovation, desperation, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Chen activated her comm unit, opening a channel to the Dominion. Jackson, patch me through to all ship commanders. Priority Alpha. Within moments, the holographic display showed the faces of the Seoul Defense Fleet's senior officers. Chen could see the determination in their expressions, mixed with the uncertainty of facing an unknown enemy. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, I've completed my briefing with Valerie in command. The situation is worse than we anticipated, but not hopeless. We're facing an enemy that can adapt to conventional military tactics, but that adaptation might also be their weakness. Captain Torres spoke first. Admiral, what kind of weakness? They're learning from every engagement, becoming more effective against the tactics they've already encountered. But that means they're also becoming specialized. The more they adapt to fighting one way, the more vulnerable they might become to completely different approaches. The tactical implications began to sink in around the command center. If the Devourers had spent months adapting to Valerian military doctrine, they might be unprepared for humanity's more chaotic approach to warfare. I'm ordering the fleet to prepare for operation. The planning session that followed in the Valerian command center was unlike anything Admiral Chen had experienced in her military career. Around the holographic tactical display, human and Valerian officers worked together to devise a strategy that neither species would have attempted alone. The key is understanding their adaptive process, Commander Stone explained, manipulating the display to show recorded Devourer behavioral patterns. They learn from each engagement, but that learning appears to be cumulative and linear. They improve their defenses against the specific tactics they've encountered. Sector Commander Vexai studied the human analysis with growing interest. You're suggesting they can only adapt to threats they've directly experienced? Exactly, Chen confirmed. Which means if we can present them with completely novel tactics that don't exist in their experience database, we might be able to catch them off guard. Lieutenant Commander Kim, the Valorian's chief tactical officer, leaned forward. Admiral, with respect, we've tried unconventional approaches. Stealth attacks, coordinated strikes from multiple vectors, even ramming attacks with unmanned vessels. They adapted to all of them. But, you were still thinking like traditional military forces, Chen replied. You were using established tactical doctrines, just in unexpected combinations. What I'm proposing is something different. She activated her personal comm unit and brought up a series of files from human military history. Images and videos began playing on the secondary displays, showing everything from ancient guerrilla warfare to modern asymmetric conflicts. Humans have never had the luxury of technological superiority, Chen explained. Throughout our history, we've faced enemies with better weapons, better armor, better ships. We've learned to win through creativity, adaptability, and a willingness to do things that seem impossible. The recording showed human forces using terrain to their advantage, turning enemy strengths into weaknesses, and achieving victory through tactics that defied conventional military wisdom. Chen watched the Valerian officers study the footage with growing understanding. You fight chaos against order, Vexai observed. You turn warfare itself into a form of creative expression. Something like that, Chen agreed. The Devourers have adapted to fight organized military forces using established doctrines. They've never faced an enemy that treats warfare as an art form rather than a science. Commander Stone pulled up detailed scans of the Devourer construction facilities.
Admiral, I've been analyzing their operational patterns.
They're incredibly efficient, but that efficiency comes from rigid adherence to optimal procedures.
They don't waste motion, don't take unnecessary risks, and don't deviate from their established protocols.
Which makes them predictable, Chen concluded. If we can force them to react to situations they've never encountered, situations that don't fit their behavioral models, we might be able to disrupt their operations. The next several hours were spent developing what would later be known as the human doctrine, a tactical approach that emphasized unpredictability, improvisation, and deliberate inefficiency as weapons against an adaptive enemy.
The first phase involves deception, Chen explained to the assembled officers.
We're going to make them think we're attacking with conventional tactics, force them to adapt their defenses accordingly.
Then, we're going to do something completely different. Captain Torres, commanding the heavy cruiser Indomitable, studied the preliminary battle plans.
Admiral, this is going to require split-second timing and absolute coordination between our forces and the Valerian survivors.
Can it be done? Chen asked Vexhai.
The Valerian commander was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing the risks against the potential rewards.
Admiral, what you're proposing violates every principle of sound military strategy.
It's reckless, dangerous, and has a very high probability of failure.
But it's also the first plan in 4 months that offers any hope of actually hurting them. Vexhai's expression hardened with determination. My people are willing to try.
The plan that emerged was complex and dangerous, requiring precise coordination between forces that had never worked together before. The Seoul Defense Fleet would approach the Devourer facilities using standard tactical formations, drawing their attention and forcing them to adapt their defenses. Meanwhile, the surviving Valerian ships would position themselves throughout the system using stealth technology. The Devourers will expect us to engage their combat units, Chen explained during the final briefing. Instead, we're going to ignore them completely and attack their construction process directly.
Squadron Leader Kim raised his hand. Admiral, how do we attack a construction process?
By disrupting it in ways they can't predict or counter, Stone replied.
We've identified several points in their operation where small disruptions could cascade into major failures.
The holographic display showed the internal structure of a Devourer facility, with key systems highlighted in red.
They're incredibly efficient because every component is precisely calibrated.
But that also makes them fragile.
If we can introduce even small amounts of chaos into their systems, the effects should multiply. What kind of chaos? Asked Captain Martinez from the destroyer Relentless. Chen smiled. Human chaos.
Unpredictable, irrational, and impossible to model mathematically.
Over the next 18 hours, both fleets prepared for what everyone understood might be their final battle. The Seoul Defense Fleet ran diagnostics on weapons systems that had never been tested against enemies like the Devourers. The Valerian survivors checked and rechecked their stealth systems, knowing that discovery before the attack began would mean certain destruction. Chen spent the time before the battle walking through the Dominion, speaking with crew members and ensuring that everyone understood both the importance of their mission and the risks they were taking. The conversations were sobering, but they also reinforced her confidence in her people. Admiral, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez said as she inspected the torpedo loading systems, the crew wants you to know we're behind you 100%. Whatever those things are, they picked the wrong species to mess with. Similar sentiments echoed throughout the ship. Humanity had faced extinction threats before, and they had always responded with stubborn determination and creative violence. This would be no different.
The battle began at 0800-hour ship time, with the Seoul Defense Fleet dropping out of quantum space at maximum weapons range from the Devourer facilities. Immediately, alerts began sounding throughout the alien structures as their detection systems identified the new threat.
They're responding exactly as predicted, reported Commander Jackson. Combat units moving to intercept, construction operations shifting to defensive configurations.
Chen watched the tactical display as 17 massive Devourer structures began maneuvering toward the human fleet. Each one was larger than anything in human space, bristling with weapons and defensive systems that had been optimized through months of combat against Valerian forces.
All ships, execute Formation Delta, Chen ordered. Make them think we're attempting a standard fleet engagement.
The Seoul Defense Fleet spread into a classic battle formation, with heavy cruisers in the center and destroyers screening the flanks. It was a textbook approach that any military academy would have recognized, and exactly what the Devourers expected to face.
Enemy units closing to weapons range, Jackson reported. They're deploying the same defensive pattern they used against Valerian fleet actions.
Perfect, Chen muttered. All ships, engage at maximum range.
Target their forward weapon systems.
The space between the fleets lit up with weapons fire as humanity's most advanced warships opened fire on the Devourer combat units. The enemy responded with their own weapons, strange energy beams that seemed to bend space itself as they reached toward the human ships.
Forward shields holding, reported the tactical officer. But, Admiral, their weapons are unlike anything we've encountered. They're not just hitting our shields, they're trying to disrupt the quantum structure of our armor. Understood. Continue the engagement. Make them think this is all we've got.
For 20 minutes, the two fleets hammered at each other with increasing intensity. The Devourers began adapting to human weapon frequencies, adjusting their defensive systems to counter the specific threats they were facing.
It was exactly what Chen had hoped for. Phase 2, she announced. All ships, execute dispersal pattern Omega.
The Sol defense fleet suddenly scattered in all directions, abandoning their formation and fleeing toward different points in the system. To any observer, it would have looked like a complete rout, a defeated fleet running for their lives. The Devourers responded predictably, dividing their forces to pursue the scattered human ships. Their combat units spread throughout the system, each group following its assigned targets with mechanical precision. Now, Chen whispered, activating the encrypted communication channel to the Valerian survivors. Suddenly, the system erupted into chaos as 47 Valerian ships materialized from their hiding places throughout the asteroid belt. But, instead of engaging the Devourer combat units, they headed directly for the construction facilities that had been left undefended. Valerian forces beginning their attack runs, Vexhi's voice came through the comm system. Targeting construction nodes as planned. The beauty of the plan became apparent as it unfolded. The Devourers had adapted their defensive systems to counter direct military attacks, but they had never encountered forces that deliberately targeted infrastructure while ignoring military units.
Human ships, this is Vexhi. Beginning Phase 3.
Chen smiled as she watched the tactical display.
Phase 3 was pure human inspiration.
Instead of trying to destroy the Devourer facilities outright, the attacking ships were introducing random elements into their construction processes. Mining beam number 7 disrupted, reported Lieutenant Foster, monitoring the Valerian attacks. They've introduced metallic chaff into the material stream.
Construction node 15 showing cascade failures, added another voice.
The precision alignment has been knocked off by 0.003%. 0.003% didn't sound like much, but, in a system designed for absolute precision, it was catastrophic. The Devourer facilities began producing malformed components, structures that looked right but were subtly wrong in ways that would cause them to fail under stress. The beauty of it, Commander Stone observed, is that they can't adapt to random chaos.
There's nothing to learn from, no pattern to counter.
But the Devourers were not defenseless. As their construction processes began failing, their combat units started returning to protect the facilities.
Chen watched as the alien ships began converging on the Valerian attack force.
All ships, she broadcast to the Sol defense fleet, execute final phase.
Target the returning combat units.
Now came the most dangerous part of the plan. The human ships, spread throughout the system, began converging on the Devourer combat units from multiple directions. But, instead of using conventional attack patterns, they employed tactics that would have horrified any traditional military strategist. Ships attack singly and, in pairs, using asteroids for cover, employing ramming attacks with unmanned torpedoes, and deliberately exposing themselves to enemy fire to draw attention away from other units. It was chaotic, inefficient, and completely unpredictable.
The Relentless is making an attack run on Combat Unit 12, Jackson reported. Captain Martinez is using a debris field to mask his approach.
The Indomitable and Defiance are coordinating a pincer movement against Combat Unit 7, added another voice.
They're using overlapping shield matrices to share defensive loads.
Chen watched as her captains improvised tactics in real time, adapting to the changing battlefield in ways that no Devourer artificial intelligence could predict. Each human ship fought differently, using the creativity and intuition that had made humanity successful throughout their history. The tide of battle began to turn as the Devourer adaptive systems struggled to cope with the constantly changing tactical environment.
Their weapons began missing targets that should have been easy to hit.
Their defensive systems failed to anticipate attacks that came from unexpected directions. Admiral Stone reported with excitement, "We're detecting massive system failures in the construction facilities. The cascade effects from the Valerian attacks are spreading throughout their networks. Any signs that they're adapting to our tactics?" "Negative. They appear to be attempting to process our behavior through their standard combat algorithms, but our actions don't fit any recognizable patterns." Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The plan was working, but she knew the battle was far from over. The Devourers still had significant combat capability, and they were beginning to concentrate their forces around their most important facilities. "All ships, prepare for final assault. Target the primary construction hub." The primary construction hub was the largest of the Devourer facilities, a massive structure that appeared to coordinate the activities of the smaller units. If they could disable it, the entire operation might collapse. "Valerian forces, this is Admiral Chen. Are you ready for the final push?" "Ready, Admiral." Vexai's voice was grim but determined.
"My people know this is our last chance. All forces, execute final assault. Give them everything we have."
What followed was 30 minutes of the most intense combat any of them had ever experienced. Human and Valerian ships attacked the primary facility from every conceivable direction, using every weapon in their arsenals and several they improvised on the spot. The Devourers fought back with desperate intensity, their remaining combat units forming a defensive screen around the construction hub. But their predictable defensive patterns proved inadequate against the creative chaos of human and Valerian cooperation. "Direct hit on the primary quantum core," reported the targeting officer.
"The facility is showing critical system failures."
"Another hit," called out Commander Stone.
"The construction matrix is collapsing."
Chen watched in amazement as the massive Devourer facility began to tear itself apart from the inside. The precise quantum fields that held its structure together were failing, causing cascading collapses throughout its framework. "All units, fall back to safe distance," she ordered.
"That thing is going to go up like a supernova." The explosion, when it came, was unlike anything any of them had ever witnessed.
The destruction of the primary facility created a quantum shockwave that propagated throughout the system, causing secondary explosions in the remaining Devourer structures. When the light faded and the debris settled, the immediate threat was over. The Devourer construction operation in the Valerian home system had been completely destroyed. "Damage report," Chen called out as the bridge crew worked to assess their situation. 17 ships damaged, 6 severely, Jackson reported.
"No total losses. Casualties are surprisingly light considering the intensity of the engagement." "What about the Valorians?"
"Vexai is reporting 12 ships lost, but the majority of his force survived."
"Admiral, they did it. They actually pulled it off."
Chen nodded, but her expression remained serious.
"This was just one system. How many more Devourer operations are scattered throughout the galaxy?"
As if in answer to her question, the communications array began picking up new transmissions from across the Veil sector. Distress calls from other species, reports of Devourer activities in systems they had never heard of, and emergency broadcasts from civilizations fighting for their survival.
"Admiral," Foster announced, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council.
They're demanding our immediate withdrawal from the sector." Chen looked around the bridge at her exhausted but victorious crew. They had proven that the Devourers could be defeated, but the battle had also revealed the true scope of the threat facing the galaxy. "Send a reply to the Council," she said finally. "Tell them that humanity appreciates their concern, but we have more work to do." The aftermath of the Battle of Valerian Prime, as it would later be known, brought both hope and sobering reality to the survivors. Admiral Chen stood in the reconstructed command center of the Valerian asteroid base, surrounded by displays showing the expanding scope of the Devourer threat across the galaxy. 18 star systems under active attack, reported Commander Stone, her voice heavy with the weight of the intelligence they had gathered.
Another 23 showing the preliminary signs of Devourer infiltration.
And those are just the ones we can confirm.
Sector Commander Vexai moved between the holographic displays with renewed energy.
The victory at Valerian Prime had given his people something they had almost forgotten: hope. "Admiral, our surviving ships have been conducting reconnaissance throughout the sector.
What we've found suggests that our system was just one of many simultaneous operations." Chen studied the tactical overview with growing concern.
Red indicators marked confirmed devourer activities, yellow showed probable infiltration, and green indicated systems that remained secure. The pattern was disturbing. They're operating on a galactic scale.
This isn't just an attack on the Valorians or any single civilization.
This is a coordinated assault on all sentient life. Which explains why the Council is so reluctant to acknowledge the threat, added Lieutenant Commander Kim, who had been monitoring Council communications.
If they admit that the Devourers represent an existential threat to galactic civilization, they'll have to take action.
And they're not prepared for this kind of war. The Galactic Council had been designed to manage disputes between established civilizations, not to coordinate a defense against an enemy that threatened the existence of all spacefaring life. Their bureaucratic approach to crisis management was completely inadequate for the current situation. "Ma'am," Foster announced from the communication station, "we're receiving an encrypted transmission from Fleet Command.
Priority Alpha."
Chen activated the holographic display, and the face of Fleet Admiral Hayes appeared, his expression grim but determined. "Sarah, I hope you have good news, because the political situation here is getting complicated. We destroyed the primary Devourer operation in the Valerian system," Chen reported.
"But, Admiral, what we've learned suggests that this is much bigger than anyone imagined." "How much bigger?"
"Galaxy-threatening bigger. We're talking about a coordinated attack on multiple civilizations simultaneously."
"The Valorians were just one target among many."
Hayes was quiet for a moment, clearly processing the implications.
"Sarah, I need you to understand the position we're in.
The Lunar Council is screaming for your court-martial.
The Galactic Council is demanding that we withdraw from the sector immediately.
And half the civilian government thinks we should comply with Council directives and let them handle this diplomatically."
"And the other half?"
"The other half has been looking at the same intelligence reports we have.
They understand what we're facing."
Chen had expected political complications, but the magnitude of the crisis demanded action regardless of diplomatic consequences.
"Admiral, request permission to continue operations in the Vale sector. We've proven that the Devourers can be defeated.
With Valerian support and proper coordination, we can start rolling back their advance."
"Permission granted," Hayes said without hesitation. "But, Sarah, you need to understand that you're operating without political cover. If this goes wrong, Earth won't be able to protect you or your people." "Understood, Admiral. We'll make it work."
The transmission ended, leaving Chen to contemplate the challenges ahead. The Sol Defense Fleet had proven that human tactics could defeat the Devourers, but 18 star systems under attack represented a scale of operation that would require resources and coordination far beyond what her fleet could provide alone. Admiral Vex High approached her station, carrying a data tablet with new intelligence reports. "Our reconnaissance teams have made some interesting discoveries about Devourer operations. It appears that their activities follow a specific pattern."
"What kind of pattern?"
"They begin with reconnaissance, using small infiltration units to gather detailed information about their targets. Once they have complete intelligence, they deploy construction fleets to begin harvesting operations."
"But, Admiral, there's something else."
Vex High activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of Devourer activities throughout the galaxy.
"Look at the targeting priorities. They're not randomly attacking inhabited systems.
They're specifically targeting civilizations with advanced technology and significant industrial capacity." Chen studied the pattern, and slowly the strategic picture began to emerge.
"They're not just consuming resources.
They're eliminating potential threats to their expansion."
"Exactly. Every civilization they've attacked has been spacefaring and technologically advanced.
They're systematically removing any species that might be capable of mounting effective resistance."
The implications were terrifying.
The Devourers weren't just harvesting resources for construction projects, they were conducting a deliberate campaign of genocide against any species that might threaten their long-term objectives. Which means, Chen concluded grimly, that humanity is definitely on their target list.
"Our defeat of their operation here will only make us a higher priority."
Commander Stone looked up from her analysis workstation. "Admiral, if that's their strategy, then our victory at Valerian Prime might have made the situation worse."
"We've proven that humans can threaten their operations. They'll have to respond to that." Chen nodded. It was the classic dilemma of asymmetric warfare. Success against a superior enemy often brought escalated retaliation.
But the alternative had been to allow an entire civilization to be consumed without resistance.
Vexai, what's the current status of your fleet? 38 operational ships, Admiral.
Enough for reconnaissance and limited combat operations, but not sufficient for offensive actions against major Devourer installations.
And the sole defense fleet? 283 ships operational, Stone reported.
We lost 17 in the battle, but our repair capabilities are bringing damaged ships back online. Chen moved to the central tactical display, studying the positions of known Devourer operations. If they were going to continue the fight, they needed to choose their targets carefully and coordinate their efforts with other potential allies.
Commander, open a channel to all surviving Valerian units. And patch in the sole defense fleet command frequency.
Within minutes, the command center was filled with the faces of ship commanders from both fleets.
Chen recognized the mix of determination and uncertainty in their expressions.
These were experienced officers, but they were facing a situation unlike anything in their training or experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chen began, we've proven that the Devourers can be defeated.
But we've also learned that the threat they represent goes far beyond anything we initially understood. We're facing an enemy that's conducting a coordinated campaign against all advanced civilizations in the galaxy.
Captain Torres spoke first. Admiral, what are our strategic objectives? Do we continue defensive operations, or do we take the fight to them?
Both, Chen replied.
We're going to divide our forces into 3 task groups. The first will continue working with Valerian units to clear Devourer operations from this sector.
The second will conduct reconnaissance missions to gather intelligence on Devourer activities in other regions. The third will return to human space to coordinate defensive preparations with Fleet Command. It was an ambitious plan that would stretch their resources to the breaking point, but Chen believed it was their best chance to prevent the Devourers from achieving their apparent objective of galactic domination.
Vexai, I'm going to need your people to take the lead on sector clearing operations.
You know the local systems better than we do, and your stealth capabilities are superior to ours.
Agreed, Admiral.
But we'll need human support for any major engagements.
You'll have it. I'm assigning 40 ships to work directly with your forces. Over the next several hours, they developed detailed operational plans for each task group.
The sector clearing force would target smaller Devourer installations, using the tactics they had developed at Valerian Prime. The reconnaissance force would investigate reports of Devourer activity in other sectors, gathering intelligence and identifying potential allies. The coordination force would work with Fleet Command to prepare Earth's defenses and share tactical information with other civilizations.
Admiral, Foster announced, we're receiving a transmission from an unknown source. It's not coming from any recognized Council civilization. Put it through.
The voice that came through the speakers was harsh and mechanical, clearly artificial but carrying an unmistakable tone of authority.
Human vessels, this is Devourer Command Node 7. Your interference in our operations has been noted and analyzed. Chen felt a chill run down her spine.
In all their previous encounters, the Devourers had never attempted to communicate.
This is Admiral Chen of the Sole Defense Fleet. Respond. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that require reassessment of our operational priorities. You will cease all hostile actions immediately and withdraw from this sector.
That's not going to happen, Chen replied firmly.
Then, you will be destroyed. Your homeworld's location has been determined. Devourer forces are being redirected to eliminate the human threat.
The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Chen stared at the display, processing the implications of what they had just heard.
They've never communicated before, Vexai said quietly.
In 4 months of warfare, they never once attempted to negotiate or threaten. The fact that they're talking to you suggests something has changed.
It suggests we've gotten their attention, Chen replied grimly. And that might not be a good thing.
Commander Stone was already working at her analysis station.
Admiral, if they're redirecting forces toward Earth, we need to warn Fleet Command immediately. Do it. Priority Alpha transmission.
As Stone began encoding the warning message, Chen considered their options. The threat to Earth changed everything.
They could no longer focus solely on helping the Valorians or conducting reconnaissance missions. Humanity's survival was now directly at stake.
All task group commanders, she announced, priority change. 50% of our forces returned to Earth immediately to assist with defensive preparations. The remaining ships continue operations here, but with modified objectives.
What kind of modifications? Asked Captain Martinez. We're no longer just trying to clear Devourer installations. We're trying to delay and disrupt their operations long enough for Earth to prepare for their arrival.
It was a sobering shift in mission parameters. Instead of being the rescuers, they had become the targets. But Chen had confidence in her people's ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Admiral Vexhai approached her station with a determined expression. Valerian Command has authorized me to offer full military alliance with humanity. We're prepared to commit our surviving forces to the defense of Earth.
Chen was surprised by the offer.
The Valorians had every reason to focus on rebuilding their own civilization rather than defending another species' homeworld. Commander, that's an extremely generous offer, but you have your own people to protect.
Admiral, the Devourers destroyed our worlds, but they didn't destroy our civilization. As long as Valerian ships fly and Valerian officers command them, we exist.
And we remember our debts. Chen extended her hand to the alien commander. Then, we fight together. Together, Vexhai agreed. The next phase of the war was beginning, and Chen knew it would test both species in ways they had never been tested before. But, for the first time since receiving that first distress signal, she felt confident that they had a chance to win. The Devourers had made a critical error. They had threatened humanity's homeworld, and that was something no human would tolerate. The same stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had characterized human history would now be focused against an enemy that had never faced such determined resistance. All ships, Chen announced to the combined fleet, prepare for quantum jump to Earth. We have a world to defend. As the ships began forming up for departure, Chen took one last look at the tactical displays showing Devourer operations throughout the galaxy. The enemy was vast, powerful, and implacable. But they had just learned something important about human nature. When you threaten Earth, you don't get a surrender. You get a war. The return to Sol system was unlike any homecoming Admiral Chen had ever experienced. As the combined human-Valorian fleet dropped out of quantum space, they were greeted by a sight that filled every heart with both pride and determination. Earth's entire defensive infrastructure had been transformed into the most formidable fortress in human history. "My God," whispered Commander Jackson as he studied the tactical displays. "They've turned the whole system into a weapons platform."
Chen nodded in amazement.
In the 6 days since her warning had reached Earth, Fleet Command had accomplished what should have taken months. Every space station, orbital platform, and asteroid mining facility had been converted or reinforced for military use. The asteroid belt itself had been seeded with automated defense platforms, creating overlapping fields of fire that would challenge any attacking force.
"Incoming transmission from Fleet Command," reported Foster. "It's Admiral Hayes."
The familiar face of Fleet Admiral Hayes appeared on the main screen, but Chen could see the strain of the past week etched in his features.
"Sarah, welcome home.
I hope you brought some good news, because we're going to need every advantage we can get."
"How long do we have?" Chen asked without preamble.
Our deep space sensors detected massive quantum signatures approximately 18 hours ago. Based on their approach vector and speed, we estimate the Devourer fleet will arrive in 43 hours. Chen felt her stomach tighten. 43 hours to prepare for a battle that would determine the survival of human civilization.
"What's our defensive posture?" "Everything we have," Hayes replied grimly.
"Every ship that can fly, every weapon that can fire, every soldier who can fight.
We've also received some unexpected assistance."
A new voice came through the comms system, one Chen didn't recognize.
"Admiral Chen, this is Admiral Kefvar of the Altarian Defense Corps. We understand you could use some help."
Chen blinked in surprise. The Altarians were one of the founding members of the Galactic Council, a proud and ancient civilization that rarely involved itself in the conflicts of younger species.
"Admiral Kefvar, I thought the Council had forbidden intervention in this matter."
"The Council has forbidden official intervention," Kefvar replied with what sounded like amusement. "However, individual civilizations retain the right to make their own decisions about mutual defense agreements. The Altarian Republic has chosen to interpret the human request for assistance as falling under our bilateral defense treaty."
Chen had to smile.
The Altarians were notorious for finding legal loopholes in Council directives when it suited their purposes.
What kind of assistance are we talking about?
150 Eltarian warships, plus technical support and intelligence sharing. We may be bound by council neutrality, but we're not blind to the threat these devourers represent. The addition of Altarian forces changed the tactical picture significantly. Combined with the Valerian survivors and the full might of the Sol defense fleet, they would have nearly 600 ships to face whatever force the devourers brought to Earth.
Admiral Hayes, Chen said, request permission to come aboard the Constitution for strategic briefing. Granted. And, Sarah, bring your Valerian friend. We're going to need every piece of intelligence about devourer tactics we can get.
2 hours later, Chen found herself in the largest strategy session in human history. The command center of the Constitution, Fleet Command's flagship, had been expanded to accommodate representatives from 3 different species, all united by the common goal of preventing Earth's destruction. Admiral Kethvar was typical of his species, tall, graceful, with the silver-blue skin and large eyes that marked Altarian physiology. But, beneath the elegant appearance, Chen could sense the same grim determination that filled every other officer in the room.
Gentlemen, ladies, Hayes began, addressing the assembled commanders, let's review what we're facing.
The central holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional tactical model of Sol system.
Red indicators marked the positions of defending forces, while yellow arrows showed the projected approach routes of the Devourer fleet.
Based on long-range sensor data, Hayes continued, we're looking at approximately 40 Devourer combat units, each comparable in size to our largest dreadnoughts. They're supported by an unknown number of construction vessels and what appear to be command ships. Sector Commander Vexhai leaned forward. Admiral, 40 combat units represents a significantly larger force than anything we encountered in Valerian space. They're taking the threat to Earth very seriously.
What about their tactical approach? Asked Admiral Kethvar. Will they attempt orbital bombardment, or do you expect them to try landing forces?
Chen studied the sensor readings carefully.
Based on our experience in the Valerian system, they don't use orbital bombardment.
They prefer to systematically disassemble planets to harvest the raw materials.
That means they'll have to get close.
Which gives us an advantage, added Commander Stone. We've designed our defensive strategy around close-range engagements where our numerical superiority and knowledge of local space can be maximized.
The defensive plan that had been developed was unlike anything in military history.
Instead of trying to meet the Devourers in open space, the Allied fleet would use Earth's entire system as a battlefield, drawing the enemy into carefully prepared killing zones. Phase 1 involves harassment and delay, Hayes explained.
Long-range units will engage the Devourers as they enter the outer system, using hit-and-run tactics to disrupt their formation and gather intelligence on their current capabilities.
Phase 2 brings them into the asteroid belt, Chen continued.
We've seeded the entire region with automated weapons platforms and mobile defense units.
The goal is to fragment their fleet and force them to fight in small groups.
Phase 3 is the decisive engagement, Kethvar added. All remaining forces converge around Earth itself for the final battle.
It was a sound strategy that played to their strengths while minimizing the Devourer's advantages. But everyone in the room understood that the success of the plan depended on their ability to adapt faster than their enemy could learn. There's one more element, Hayes said, his expression growing even more serious. We've been in communication with several other civilizations that have faced Devourer attacks. The Krextai Republic, the Hellion Commonwealth, and the Zephyrian Empire have all agreed to coordinate their defensive efforts with ours.
Chen felt a surge of hope. If multiple civilizations were working together, they might be able to prevent the Devourers from achieving their apparent goal of galactic domination.
What kind of coordination? She asked. Simultaneous strikes against Devourer installations throughout the galaxy, Hayes replied. The theory is that if we can force them to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously, we can prevent them from concentrating their forces for decisive battles.
Admiral Kethvar activated a secondary display showing galactic-wide tactical information.
The Altarian Republic has been coordinating intelligence sharing between all participating civilizations. What we've learned suggests that the Devourers have been preparing for these coordinated operations for some time.
Meaning?
Meaning they expected us to eventually organize effective resistance.
They've been building up forces specifically to counter multi-species cooperation.
Chen studied the intelligence.